I ran through the emergency doors of Mercy West General Hospital. My shoes made a squeaking sound on the floor, and I was breathing hard. The call had come 20 minutes earlier. It was an emergency, a trauma case. They needed me right away, but the person on the phone had a military tone. He wouldn't give me details, just a few words that really scared me. Navy SEAL. Critical. Hurry. I had promised myself I was done with this. I was done with military injuries, done with battlefield medicine, and done with watching young soldiers die on my table while I tried to save them with bad equipment and no good options. I'd spent 2 years working in a quiet suburban clinic, treating things like sprained ankles and the flu. I chose a normal life on purpose because the other life cost too much. But when I heard those words on the phone, I just started moving before I could even think about it. It was old training, military instincts. The rule that you never leave a soldier behind, even if helping them might break me all over again. I got to the surgical floor and looked for OR 5, where they said the patient was. My hands were already shaking. It wasn't from running. It was from memories I had tried to bury for 2 years. Helmand Province. All the dust and blood, the sound of helicopters. I remembered holding the hand of a 22-year-old soldier as he died, telling him lies that he would be okay. I found OR 5. Through the window, I could see the usual chaos of a trauma surgery. The patient was on the table, the team was around him, and the monitors were flashing warnings. Even from out here, I could see the blood. There was too much of it. It was the kind of bleeding that meant he only had minutes, not hours. I reached for the door to the scrub room. A hand grabbed my wrist. "Hey, where are you going?" A man in scrubs, maybe in his mid-40s, was blocking my way. He looked confident, like a senior doctor. His name tag said, "Dr. Mark Harrison, Chief of Surgery." "I was called in," I said. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Emergency trauma, Navy SEAL." "You?" Dr. Harrison looked me over. His expression changed from surprised to something like he was looking down on me. "How old are you, 25? "I'm 29, I said, even though I knew I looked younger. "I'm short, and have long, dark hair that I hadn't had time to tie back right." And I was specifically requested. "Listen, kid." His tone was patronizing, like he was talking to a child. "I appreciate you wanting to help, but this isn't a class. We have a Navy SEAL with combat injuries in there. Damaged artery, possible internal bleeding, shrapnel. This needs experience and steady hands. No offense, but you look like you just got out of med school." I felt that old anger rising. This happened all the time. People looked at me and assumed I wasn't qualified. They didn't know about my years as a combat surgeon. They didn't know about the surgeries I did while being shot at. They didn't know about the commendations I got. "I understand how I look," I said, forcing myself to be calm. "But I was called for this specific case. If you just check—" Just then, another surgeon ran out of the OR, his mask down. He looked pale. "We have a problem. The femoral artery damage is worse than we thought. The standard repair isn't working. He's bleeding out faster than we can get blood into him." Dr. Harrison cursed and started moving to the scrub room. "Get me another unit of O-negative and prep for a bypass." I followed him. "Dr. Harrison, please, I can help." "You can help by staying out of my way," he snapped at me. "This is life or death. I don't have time to babysit an inexperienced doctor playing dress-up." He went into the scrub room. I just stood there in the hallway, watching through the window as the team worked like crazy. The monitors showed his blood pressure dropping and his heart rate rising. He was in shock from blood loss. The patient was dying. That's when I saw his face clearly for the first time. Even with the oxygen mask and the drapes, even as pale as he was, I knew him. It was Captain Ben Carter. Navy SEAL Team 3. He was the one who held me when I cried after I lost my first patient in Helmand. He was the soldier who carried me to safety when I froze up during an ambush. He was the only one who understood why I quit military medicine and didn't try to stop me. Ben Carter. He once told me I was the best combat surgeon he'd ever met. He said if he ever got hit badly, he'd want me to be the one operating on him. I put my hand on the glass, watching Ben's vitals get worse. The surgical team was good, I could see that. But they were using normal hospital techniques for battlefield injuries. Combat wounds need different thinking, different methods. You can't learn those in a clean OR in America. Ben was dying, and I was stuck in a hallway watching it happen. It was just like Helmand all over again. No, not again. I would not let this happen again. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed the number they gave me. It rang twice. A gruff voice answered. "General Vance, this is Dr. Mitchell," I said, my voice tight. "I'm at the hospital. They won't let me in the OR." The line was quiet for a few seconds. Then, "Stay right where you are. I'm 5 minutes away." The call ended. I kept watching the window. I watched Ben's blood pressure fall. I watched the surgeon struggle to control the bleeding. I watched the clock on the wall. I just prayed that General Michael Vance would get here before those 5 minutes were up. Because if Ben died while I was standing outside this room, unable to help, unable to use the skills I learned in the worst places on earth, if that happened, I knew I would never, ever forgive myself. I left combat medicine to get away from the guilt of the people I couldn't save. But watching Ben die because of hospital rules and a surgeon's pride, that would be a new kind of guilt I could never run away from. The surgical hallway at Mercy West felt like a different planet compared to the panic behind the OR doors. It was sterile, quiet, and controlled. It was everything I used to like about civilian hospitals, but right now it just felt like a trap as I watched Ben Carter's vitals get worse on the monitor. Inside OR 5, Dr. Harrison was shouting orders. His earlier confidence was gone, replaced by a barely hidden panic. I could tell what was happening from here. I had been in this exact spot too many times. The damage to the femoral artery was bad, probably from shrapnel. It creates messy, irregular tears that normal stitches can't close. Every time they fixed one spot, another would start bleeding. They were fighting a battle they couldn't win against his own body. "We need a vascular surgery consult," one of the other surgeons yelled out. "No time," Harrison yelled back. "Vascular is 40 minutes away. He doesn't have 40 minutes." My hands turned into fists. I knew exactly what to do. There was a special technique for this, one made for battlefield injuries. It used a specific pattern of interrupted stitches that could handle the messy tissue damage from shrapnel. I learned it from a Marine surgeon in Helmand. I had used it 7 times on patients with the same kind of injury, and it worked every time. But that technique wasn't in the normal civilian textbooks. It wasn't taught in medical schools here. It only existed in the manuals of combat medics and field surgeons. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged. I turned and saw General Michael Vance step out. His army uniform was perfect, even though it was late. His face looked serious and hard. 2 military police officers stood behind him. General Vance was in his early 60s, with gray hair. He looked like a man who had been giving orders for 40 years. I had met him once, 3 years ago in Afghanistan. He had personally given me a commendation for saving 12 soldiers during an ambush. I was covered in blood and completely exhausted, but he looked at me like he understood. Like one soldier to another, even though our jobs were different. "Dr. Mitchell." His voice was the kind that made people stand up straight. "Why aren't you in that operating room?" "The chief of surgery won't let me in," I said, keeping it simple. "He thinks I'm too young and don't have enough experience. He doesn't know about my military service." Vance's jaw got tight. "Where is he?" I pointed to the OR. "In there with Captain Carter, who's dying because they're using the wrong methods for a combat wound." The general walked right to the observation window, looked in, and then turned back to me. His eyes looked like he had seen too many good men die. "Can you save him?" "Yes, sir." My voice was steady. This was the one thing I was sure of. "If they let me in there, I can save him." "Then let's make that happen." Vance pushed through the doors into the scrub room, and I was right behind him. The two MPs stood guard outside, the door. They weren't threatening, but they were making it clear they were there. Inside the scrub room, Dr. Harrison was at the sink, scrubbing his hands again after another failed attempt to stop the bleeding. He looked up, startled, when the general walked in. "Who the hell? This is a sterile area. You can't just—" Harrison stopped talking when he saw the stars on Vance's uniform. "General?" "Dr. Harrison, I assume." Vance's voice was cold. "I'm General Michael Vance, U.S. Army Medical Command. That man dying on your table is Captain Ben Carter, one of the best Navy SEALs we have. He was hurt 2 days ago on a classified mission and has been on his way here for emergency care. I specifically requested Dr. Sarah Mitchell to do his surgery because she has more experience with this exact kind of combat injury than any surgeon in this hospital." Harrison looked at me, still seeming doubtful. "General, with all due respect, she looks like she just finished medical school. This is extremely complicated." "Dr. Mitchell served 3 years as a combat surgeon in Afghanistan." Vance cut him off. "She was attached to special operations units, including SEAL teams. She has done over 200 emergency surgeries in field hospitals that would make this clean OR look like a 5-star hotel. She has saved more soldiers with shrapnel damage to their arteries than you have probably ever seen." He stepped closer to Harrison. "So when I say Dr. Mitchell is the most qualified surgeon in this building to save Captain Carter's life, that is not a request for your opinion. It is a statement of fact." The scrub room was completely silent. I could see Dr. Harrison thinking about this new information. His face changed from doubt to confusion, and then to understanding. "She was military?" Harrison asked quietly. "Is military," Vance corrected him. "She's in the active reserve, but Dr. Mitchell is still a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Medical Corps. And right now that man in there is dying because you're wasting time questioning her." I watched Harrison's face as he made up his mind. I'd seen this before. It was the moment when a doctor's pride had to give way to an emergency. Harrison was a good surgeon. I could see that from how he handled the start of the surgery. But good wasn't going to be enough. Ben needed someone great. He needed someone who learned how to operate in the worst possible conditions and knew how to save lives that normal medicine would give up on. "Dr. Mitchell." Harrison turned to me. His earlier attitude was completely gone. "If General Vance says you can save him, then I believe you can. The OR is yours." He paused, then said, "I apologize for how I treated you earlier. I judged you unfairly." "Apology accepted," I said. "There wasn't time for anything else. Now catch me up on his status. Everything you've tried, everything that failed." Harrison quickly told me the details as we both scrubbed in. My hands moved in the familiar way. It was muscle memory from hundreds of surgeries. Ben had been hit by shrapnel from an IED. They had removed 3 main pieces, but the biggest one had torn up his femoral artery. They tried a standard repair twice. Both times, the stitches tore through the damaged tissue. "Time since injury?" I asked, pulling on my surgical gloves. 47 hours. He's been kept as stable as possible while they moved him, but the damage is bad." I nodded. 47 hours was bad, but not impossible. I'd worked with worse. "Any other injuries?" "A possible fragment near the heart. We haven't been able to look at it because the artery bleeding was the immediate problem." I felt a cold chill. "Near the heart? How near?" "Lodged in the pericardium. It's a small piece, maybe 5 millimeters. The scans show it's stable for now, but trying to remove it is extremely risky. It could damage the heart." I closed my eyes for a second. This just got much, much harder. I didn't just have to fix the artery using a technique these surgeons had never seen. I also had to pull a piece of metal out from near Ben's heart. I had only done that exact procedure twice before. The last time I tried it, the patient didn't make it. "Dr. Mitchell?" Harrison's voice brought me back. "Are you okay?" I opened my eyes. I looked through the window into the OR where Ben was lying. I thought about Helmand. I thought about the young corporal whose name I still remembered, Alex Tanaka. He was 22 from Seattle. I tried to get a similar fragment out, but I tore the pericardium. I watched him bleed out in 90 seconds while I desperately tried to fix the damage my own hands had caused. I left military medicine the very next day. I couldn't stay. I couldn't risk failing like that again. But Ben was in there. Ben, who had saved my life. Ben, who understood my trauma. Ben, who once told me that Corporal Tanaka's death wasn't my fault. He said I tried the only thing I could. "I'm okay," I said, and my voice was steady now. "Let's go save Captain Carter." We walked into OR 5 together. The surgical team looked up, surprised to see me in scrubs and gloves, ready to take over. Harrison spoke to them. "Dr. Sarah Mitchell will be taking over as primary surgeon. She's military, a specialist in combat trauma. Everyone follows her lead. Any questions?" Nobody asked any questions. They were too busy watching their patient die to care about hospital politics. I walked to the operating table. I looked down at Ben Carter's pale face and made a promise to myself. It was the same promise I made to every patient. It was the promise I had broken one time, and I had spent 2 years trying to forgive myself for it. I won't let you die. Not today. Not while I'm here. Then I reached for the instruments and started to fight for Ben's life, using every skill I had learned in the worst operating rooms in the world. My hands moved over the surgical site on Ben Carter. I was focused and precise, in a way you only learn when you have to. Operate while everything is falling apart. The OR became quiet, except for the beeping of the monitors and the sound of the ventilator. The rest of the surgical team just watched me. This young doctor they had ignored just a few minutes ago was now working with a confidence they didn't understand. "Suction," I said quietly. The assisting surgeon did it immediately. The blood cleared away, and I could see the torn femoral artery. It was jagged and messy, exactly the kind of wound I'd seen so many times in Helmand. Dr. Harrison stood across the table from me, helping. His earlier doubts were gone. He was just focused on the job. He had been trying for hours to fix this with standard techniques. I knew why he failed. Those methods are for clean cuts, not for tissue that's been shredded by hot metal. "I need a different suture," I said. "A smaller gauge. And I need more room. Extend the incision 2 centimeters up and down." One of the nurses hesitated. "Dr. Mitchell, that's going to make it bleed more at first." "I know," I said without looking up. "But I need to see all the damage to use the technique that will actually work. Trust me." I glanced at Harrison. "Doctor, can you make the incision while I keep pressure on the artery?" Harrison nodded and started working. Any doubt he had about me was gone. I could feel the change in the room. They went from skeptical to trusting, from resisting me to working with me. It was the same feeling I got in field hospitals when new staff finally realized that the small woman in bloody scrubs knew exactly what she was doing. He made the incision bigger. I worked fast, using interrupted stitches in a pattern I learned from Dr. Robert Shaw, a Marine surgeon who had been in Ramadi. This technique worked with the irregular tissue, spreading the tension out over many points instead of one long line of stitches that would just tear. It took longer than a normal repair. It probably looked strange and old-fashioned to surgeons trained in modern hospitals. But it worked. Blood pressure is stabilizing, the anesthesiologist said. He sounded surprised. Heart rate is coming down. The repair is holding. I let myself feel relieved for just 1 second before I refocused. Good. Now we deal with the fragment near his heart. Everyone in the room tensed up. They had all seen the scans. It was a 5-millimeter piece of metal stuck in the pericardium, the thin sac around the heart. If we tried to move it, we could tear that sac, which would cause massive bleeding right into his chest. It was the kind of surgery that needed perfect precision, steady hands, and the kind of experience most surgeons never get. I had done it twice before. Once, it worked, and I saved a 26-year-old Army Ranger. The other time, I lost Corporal Alex Tanaka as his chest filled with blood faster than I could get it out. Dr. Mitchell, Harrison said quietly, that fragment, are you sure you want to try to get it out? The risk of cardiac tamponade is very high. We could stabilize him and transfer him to a cardiac specialist, I finished his sentence, who is 3 hours away, and that fragment isn't stable. Look at the position. I pointed to the scan on the monitor. It's resting right against the heart wall. The tissue holding it is already weak. If it moves before a specialist gets here, it could puncture the ventricle. He'll be dead in minutes. But trying to get it out now has the same risk, Harrison argued, but he sounded like he already knew he'd lost. It does, I agreed. But doing it now with me gives him the best chance, because I've done this before in worse conditions with worse equipment, and because Captain Carter specifically requested me for this surgery. That last part wasn't completely true. Ben was unconscious when he got here, but General Vance had requested me, which meant Ben's team had requested me. This meant that somewhere Ben Carter had made a plan. If something terrible happened to him, Sarah Mitchell's name was on the list of people to call. Even after 2 years, even after I quit, even knowing what happened with Corporal Tanaka, Ben still trusted me with his life. I took a deep breath, got my instruments ready, and started the very careful process of getting to the pericardium. The space was tiny. Every move had to be perfect. Too shallow, and I wouldn't reach the metal. Too deep, and I'd puncture the heart. The OR was completely silent now, except for the machines. I could feel the entire team holding their breath as I worked, millimeter by millimeter, toward that piece of metal. I can see it, I whispered. The fragment was visible. It was a dark, jagged piece of metal stuck in tissue. Harrison, I need you ready with the suction as soon as I pull this. If the pericardium tears, we will have seconds to get the blood out before his heart stops. Ready, Harrison confirmed. His hands were in position. I positioned my forceps. I grabbed the fragment. My motion was precise, something I had practiced in my head 1,000 times. For the last 2 years, I had replayed the surgery with Corporal Tanaka over and over, thinking about every cut, every move, trying to find where it went wrong. I found it. I had hesitated for just a split second. I doubted myself. In that moment, my hand moved 1 millimeter to the left. That 1 millimeter was the difference between life and death. I would not hesitate this time. I pulled the fragment out in one smooth, controlled motion. The pericardium held. There was no tear, no bleeding. Fragment removed, I announced. My voice was steady, but my heart was pounding. No perforation, checking for other damage. I checked the area carefully, looking for any sign of a problem, any sign that Ben's heart was damaged. Everything looked stable. The pericardium was intact. The heart's rhythm was strong. He's stable, the anesthesiologist said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. Vitals are good, no sign of tamponade. The whole team started to relax. The tension that had filled the room for the last 90 minutes finally broke. I stepped back from the table. My hands were shaking now that the danger was over. I had done it. Both procedures, The artery repair and the fragment removal had worked. Ben was going to live. Harrison was staring at me like he was in awe. "Dr. Mitchell, I've been a trauma surgeon for 20 years. I have never seen anyone work like that. The precision, the confidence, that technique." He shook his head. "Where did you learn to operate like that?" "Helmand Province," I said simply. "Operating on patients who couldn't be moved with limited supplies while under fire. You learn fast, you learn what works, or people die." "You saved his life," Harrison said. "That artery repair, I've never seen it. And the fragment, I couldn't have done either of those. I don't have the skills. If you hadn't been here, if General Vance hadn't forced the issue, Captain Carter would have died on this table." I looked down at Ben's unconscious face, finally letting myself really look at him. He looked older than I remembered, with more lines and more scars. 3 years of non-stop combat missions. 3 years of risking his life while I was hiding in a suburban clinic, treating colds and checking reflexes. "Close him up," I said to Harrison. "Use the standard closure. He'll need to be in the ICU for the next 48 hours, but he should make a full recovery." I pulled off my gloves. "I'll write the surgical report and check on him when he's in recovery." I left the OR, took off my gown, and walked into the empty hallway. The adrenaline that got me through the surgery was fading. Now I just felt exhausted and heavy with all the memories I had tried to forget. General Vance was waiting outside, still in his uniform, his face hard to read. "Dr. Mitchell, status?" "Captain Carter will survive," I reported. "Both procedures were successful. He'll need recovery time, but he should be able to make a full return to duty if that's what he wants." Vance nodded slowly. "You saved his life." "I did my job," I corrected him. "You did more than your job," Vance said. "You came back after everything that happened in Helmand, after you walked away from military medicine. You still answered the call when Ben needed you." He paused. "Why?" I leaned against the wall. I was suddenly too tired to stand up on my own. "Because I owed him," I said quietly. 3 years ago in Helmand, I lost a patient. Corporal Alex Tanaka. Shrapnel near his heart, just like Ben. I tried to get it out, and I failed. He bled out while I was trying to save him." "I remember reading the report," Vance said. "You did everything right. The injury was too severe." "Ben held me while I cried afterward," I continued, as if the general hadn't spoken. "He told me it wasn't my fault. He told me I had saved 11 other soldiers that day. He told me I was the best combat surgeon he'd ever worked with." I looked, right at Vance. And then I walked away. I left military medicine because I couldn't handle failing again. So when you called, when you said Ben needed me, I couldn't say no. Not to him. Not after everything he did for me. Vance was quiet for a long moment. "Dr. Mitchell, Ben Carter didn't just need any surgeon tonight. His injuries needed someone with battlefield experience, someone who could handle the kind of damage that normal surgery can't fix. But more than that, he needed someone he trusted, someone who had proven they would fight for his life even when it seemed impossible." "He was unconscious," I said. "He didn't request me." "No," Vance agreed. "But 3 months ago, Ben updated his emergency contact protocols. There's a list of people to notify if he's critically injured. Your name is at the top of that list, Dr. Mitchell, above his commanding officer, above his family. You." He let that sink in. "Ben Carter put you first because he trusted that if he was dying, you were the one person who would do everything possible to save him. And tonight, you proved him right." I sat in the empty surgeon's lounge. I was still in my scrubs, which were stained with Ben Carter's blood. I was staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The surgery had been over for 90 minutes. Ben was stable in the ICU. The team there was now treating me with a lot of respect. Dr. Harrison had walked me to the lounge himself, offering me anything I needed and apologizing again for how he first treated me. I told him it was fine. I was used to people underestimating me. In military medicine, being a small woman means you always have to prove yourself. You have to be better than everyone else just to be taken seriously. I learned to just ignore it and save my energy for the surgeries. But tonight, that attitude had almost cost Ben his life. If General Vance hadn't shown up, if Harrison had kept me out of that OR for 20 more minutes, Ben would have bled to death while I watched, helpless. The thought made me feel sick. The lounge door opened. I looked up and saw General Vance. He was carrying 2 new cups of coffee. He handed one to me and sat down across from me. "You should go home, Dr. Mitchell. Get some rest." "I want to be here when he wakes up," I said quietly. "I need to see for myself that he's okay." Vance looked at my face. This wasn't just about saving a patient, was it? This was personal. I held the warm cup in my hands. Ben saved my life in Helmand, literally. We were doing surgery in a small field base when enemy fighters attacked and got inside. I froze. It was the first time I'd been shot at while I was operating. Ben carried me to cover, then came back and stood guard while I finished working on a wounded ranger. He risked his life so I could save someone else's. "And then you lost Corporal Tanaka," Vance said. 3 weeks later, I confirmed. "Ben was there for that too. He was the one who found me after. I was just sitting outside the medical tent, covered in blood, and I couldn't stop shaking. He sat with me for 6 hours. He didn't say much. He just stayed." I looked at the general. When I told him I was leaving military medicine, he didn't try to stop me. He just said, "You've given enough. You deserve to have some peace." "But you didn't find any peace," Vance observed. "No," I admitted. "I found a suburban clinic, routine checkups, and prescription refills. Safe, boring medicine where nobody dies." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. I thought that's what I wanted. But tonight, when I was operating on Ben, using skills I learned in the worst places, that's when I felt like myself again. Like I was doing what I was meant to do. Vance leaned forward. "Dr. Mitchell, we need surgeons like you. We need combat trauma specialists who can handle injuries that normal medicine isn't ready for. The military medical system is better now, but nothing can replace battlefield experience. Nothing replaces someone who's learned to save lives when everything is going wrong." "Are you offering me a job, General?" I asked. "I'm offering you a choice," he corrected me. "Mercy West General is starting a new military trauma wing. It will be a special department just for treating service members with combat injuries. We need a director, someone who understands both military medicine and civilian hospitals. Someone who has proven they can train other people and lead a team under pressure." He paused. "Ben's case tonight showed everyone in this hospital what you can do. Dr. Harrison has already recommended you for the position." I stared at him. "Harrison wants me to stay." "He wants you to run the whole department," Vance said. "You would have full control, your own staff, a budget for equipment and training. You'd be building something that could save thousands of soldiers' lives." "I left military medicine for a reason," I said quietly. "You left because you lost one patient and couldn't forgive yourself," Vance said bluntly. "But tonight, you saved Ben Carter using the same skills, the same techniques, and the same courage that you think failed you with Corporal Tanaka. Maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for being human." Before I could answer, my pager went off. It was the ICU. Ben was awake. I stood up immediately, forgetting the coffee. Vance stood up with me. "Go see your patient, doctor. Think about what I said. You don't have to decide tonight." I nodded and walked to the ICU, my heart pounding. I had saved Ben's life. The surgery was a success. His vitals were strong, but I hadn't seen him awake yet. I hadn't faced the man I felt like I abandoned 2 years ago when I walked away from everything we both believed in. The ICU was quiet. Most of the patients were sleeping, and the monitors were beeping softly. I found Ben's room and paused outside the door. Through the window I could see him. He was propped up a little, with an oxygen tube in his nose and IV lines in both arms. His eyes were open, just staring at the ceiling. I pushed the door open. "Captain Carter, welcome back." Ben's head turned slowly, his eyes focused on me. We just looked at each other for a moment. Then he smiled. It was a tired, pained smile, but it was real. "Doc," he said. His voice was rough. "I knew you'd come." I pulled a chair up next to his bed. My professional calm was starting to crack. "You shouldn't have put my name on your emergency contact list. I left, Ben. I walked away from all of it." "I know," Ben said quietly. "But I also knew that if I ever needed someone to fight for my life when nobody else could, it would be you. Was I wrong?" I looked at his chest, which was bandaged where I had fixed the artery and taken out the shrapnel. "The surgery went well. Both procedures were successful. You'll need recovery time, but a full return to duty is possible." "That's the surgeon talking," Ben said. "What about Sarah? What does she say?" I met his eyes. "Sarah says she's terrified, that operating on you brought back every memory she's been trying to forget, that she almost didn't come because she was afraid of failing you like she failed Alex Tanaka." "You didn't fail Alex," Ben said firmly. "His injuries were too bad. You gave him a chance when nobody else would have even tried." "I tore his pericardium," I whispered. "My hands caused the bleeding that killed him." "Your hands tried to save him," Ben corrected me. "There's a difference. Alex knew the risks. He would have died on that table no matter what. You gave him hope in his last few minutes. That matters." "Does it?" I asked. "It did to the 11 other soldiers you saved that day," Ben said. "It did to me every time I've gone on a mission since then, knowing that if something went wrong, you were the person I trusted most to bring me home." I felt tears starting to form. "Why? Why would you trust me after watching me fall apart?" "Because falling apart after losing a patient means you care," Ben replied. "It means you're human. The surgeons who don't break after losing someone, those are the ones I don't trust." He reached out for my hand. "You came back tonight, Sarah. You answered the call. You saved my life using skills you swore you'd never use again. That took more courage than any surgery." I held his hand, feeling the steady pulse. The pulse that wouldn't be there if I hadn't operated. "General Vance offered me a position, director of a new military trauma wing here. He wants me to train other surgeons in combat medicine." "What did you say?" Ben asked. "I said I'd think about it," I replied. "But Ben, I don't know if I can do this again. Every day, every patient, every surgery where something could go wrong." "Nobody's asking you to be perfect," Ben interrupted. "They're asking you to be excellent, which you already are. You saved my life tonight, Sarah. Not because you're flawless, but because you're skilled, experienced, and brave enough to try when other people won't." The ICU nurse came in to check Ben's vitals. "Sorry to interrupt, but Captain Carter needs to rest. You can visit again in the morning." I stood up. "I'll check on you tomorrow." "Sarah," Ben called out as I got to the door. "Whatever you decide about Vance's offer, stay or go, return to military medicine or walk away again, I support you. But you should know this. You're the best combat surgeon I've ever known. Walking away doesn't change that." I left the ICU as the sun started to come up. I was exhausted, but I knew I couldn't sleep. I drove to a small park near my apartment and sat on a bench. I watched people jogging and walking their dogs, just normal people living normal lives. They had no idea that miles away, soldiers were fighting and bleeding in places most of them couldn't even find on a map. I thought about the last 2 years. The quiet clinic, the routine checkups, the prescription refills. I had deliberately chosen a safe life over a significant one. I chose peace over purpose. I told myself I was healing, that I deserved a rest after 3 years in a combat zone. But tonight proved what I already suspected. I was hiding, not healing. My phone rang. It was Dr. Harrison. "Dr. Mitchell, I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to talk about General Vance's offer. The hospital board met this morning. It was unanimous. We want you to be the director of the military trauma wing. You'd have complete authority over the rules, the staff, and the training. Whatever you need to build something great." "Dr. Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but—" "I misjudged you last night," Harrison interrupted. "Badly. I saw a young woman and assumed she was incompetent. But watching you operate, seeing techniques I'd never even heard of, seeing a level of skill that only comes from being in impossible situations." He paused. "You're exactly what this hospital needs. You're what our service members need." "I walked away from military medicine for a reason," I said. "You walked away from guilt," Harrison corrected me, gently. "Not from your calling. There's a difference. Last night you saved a man's life using knowledge you gained from experiences most surgeons will never have. That knowledge shouldn't be wasted treating the flu in the suburbs. It should be used to train the next generation of trauma surgeons." I was quiet, just watching the sunrise. "Think about it," Harrison said. "But Sarah, and I hope I can call you that, don't let the one patient you couldn't save stop you from saving hundreds more. Alex Tanaka wouldn't want that. Ben Carter doesn't want that. And I don't think you want that either." The call ended. I sat there watching the sun come up, thinking about Ben's words. "You came back tonight. That took courage. Maybe Harrison was right. Maybe I had been letting guilt make my decisions instead of my purpose. Maybe hiding in a quiet clinic wasn't honoring Alex Tanaka's memory. Maybe it was just wasting the skills his death had taught me." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Ben. "Stop overthinking. Your brain is loud. I can hear it from the ICU. Whatever you decide, decide because it's what you want. Not what you think you deserve or don't deserve. What you want." I smiled a little. Even drugged up and recovering from major surgery, Ben Carter could read me perfectly. What did I want? I thought about last night, the moment I took control of that OR. The feeling of my hands working on a complex repair. The satisfaction of watching Ben's vitals become stable. The knowledge that my skills, which I earned through trauma and loss, had made the difference between life and death. I wanted that. Not the trauma, not the loss, but the significance, the purpose, the knowledge that my work mattered in a way that suburban medicine never could. I pulled out my phone and dialed General Vance. "Dr. Mitchell," Vance answered. "Have you made a decision?" "I want to see the facility first," I said. "Meet your team, understand exactly what you're building. But General, if this is real, if you're serious about creating something that can actually help service members, then yes, I'm interested." "It's real," Vance confirmed. "And we're serious. When can you come by?" "Give me 2 hours," I said. "I need to shower and change and check on my patient." "Our patient," Vance corrected. "If you take this position, every service member we treat becomes your responsibility. Can you handle that?" I thought about Alex Tanaka. I thought about the 11 soldiers I saved that same day. I thought about Ben Carter, alive and recovering, because I answered the call. "Yes, sir," I said. "I can handle that." 2 weeks later, I stood in the empty space that was going to become the Mercy West General Military Trauma Wing. Construction crews were working all around me, turning old, abandoned hospital floors into special treatment rooms. General Vance walked with me, pointing out what they were planning. OR suites designed for combat injuries, equipment that matches what you'd find in a field hospital, a training center where we'll teach civilian surgeons battlefield techniques, an ICU with military staff. Everything we need to give seamless care to soldiers. I nodded, taking notes. I want simulation labs. I want realistic training scenarios where surgeons can practice these techniques before they ever touch a real patient. and I want a partnership with Walter Reed. Their combat trauma program is the best." "Already in progress," Vance confirmed. "Colonel Ramirez at Walter Reed is excited to work with us. She's heard about your surgery on Captain Carter. She wants to talk to you about your artery repair technique for their training." "It's not my technique," I said. "I learned it from Dr. Shaw in Helmand. He should get the credit." "Then we'll bring Dr. Shaw in as a consultant," Vance said. "We'll build a program that saves and teaches the knowledge you've both earned, so the next generation of surgeons doesn't have to learn it the hard way." I walked through the area, picturing what it could be. A place where soldiers got care from people who understood what they'd been through. A place where civilian surgeons learned skills that could save lives in situations that seemed impossible. A place where military and civilian medicine worked together to create something better than either one could be alone. "Dr. Mitchell?" a voice called from the doorway. I turned and saw Ben Carter. He was walking carefully, but on his own, and wearing his Navy dress uniform. He had been released from the ICU a week ago and was recovering faster than anyone expected. "Captain Carter, you're supposed to be resting." "I'm a SEAL," Ben said with a small smile. "We don't rest. We heal aggressively and get back to work." He looked around the construction site. "So this is it? The program that's stealing my favorite surgeon?" "Your only surgeon, apparently," I replied, "since I'm the only name on your emergency contact list." Ben grinned. Quality over quantity. He walked over to where I was standing, looking at the building plans on a table. "This is good, Sarah, really good. You're going to save a lot of lives here." "That's the plan," I said. "Train surgeons in combat techniques. Treat soldiers with the specialty care they deserve. Maybe stop other doctors from making the same mistakes I made." "You didn't make mistakes," Ben said firmly. "You made decisions under impossible pressure. There's a difference." I looked at him. This was the man who had saved my life, who had sat with me while I grieved, and who trusted me enough to put my name at the top of his list when he was dying. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for believing in me when I stopped believing in myself, for trusting me with your life, for giving me a reason to come back." "You would have come back eventually," Ben said. "You're too good at this to stay away. I just gave you a reason to do it sooner." He looked at the construction. "When does this place open?" 6 months, I replied. "The full facility will be operational, staff trained, and ready for patients. General Vance wants to start small and then be at full capacity by the end of the year." "And you'll be ready?" Ben asked. I thought about Corporal Alex Tanaka. I thought about the guilt I carried for 2 years. And I thought about the moment in the OR when I pulled that fragment from Ben's heart without hesitating, without being afraid, with the confidence of someone who had learned from failure and gotten better because of it. "Yes," I said. "I'll be ready." Ben nodded. "Good, because my team needs to know that if something goes wrong on our next deployment, you'll be here when we get back. That matters, Sarah, more than you probably realize." A construction worker called for General Vance to look at something. The general excused himself, leaving Ben and me alone in the half-finished building. "How long until you deploy? Again?" I asked. 4 months, Ben said. "That gives me time to fully recover, finish physical therapy, and get back in shape." He looked at me seriously. "Which means in 4 months, I'm trusting you to have this place ready, because the next time I get hit, and there will be a next time, I want to wake up knowing you're the one who's going to fix me." "No pressure," I said, trying to smile. "You can handle it," Ben replied, full of confidence. "You've already proven that." 6 months later, the Mercy West General Military Trauma Wing opened with a quiet ceremony. There was no media and no public announcements. It was just General Vance, Dr. Harrison, my new surgical team, and a small group of soldiers who were the program's first patients. I stood in OR 1. It was now fully equipped with both normal surgical technology and field hospital equipment. We had hybrid systems that could work even if the power went out. We had instruments designed for both careful precision and for making things work on the fly. It was everything I ever wished I had during those 3 years in Helmand. Dr. Harrison came up to me. He was my colleague now, not my critic. Nervous? Terrified, I admitted. What if I can't do this? What if the program fails? What if you're exactly as good as everyone believes you are? Harrison interrupted. Sarah, you've spent 6 months designing this program, training the staff, and building something amazing. Trust yourself. Trust your team. The first patient arrived. He was a Marine corporal with shrapnel injuries from an IED, similar to Ben's case, but not as bad. My team moved smoothly and efficiently. The training had worked. The surgery went perfectly. So did the second case, and the third. By the end of the first week, we had treated 12 service members. All of them were successful. These were soldiers who would have spent months recovering at Walter Reed, but now they were healing faster, getting back to duty sooner, and having fewer complications. Word spread fast through the military medical world. By the second month, we had a waiting list. By the third month, other hospitals were asking to send their staff to us for training. By the sixth month, the program I had built was being studied as a model for how military and civilian medicine could work together. Ben came back from his deployment 8 months after the wing opened. This time he wasn't a patient. He was just visiting. He found me in my office, reviewing surgical notes. "Doc," he said from the doorway, "heard you've been busy." I looked up and smiled. "Captain Carter, I heard your deployment went well. No new holes that need patching?" "Stayed boring and safe this time," Ben confirmed, which was disappointing but healthy. He sat down across from me. "I'm proud of you, Sarah, for coming back, for building this, for proving that walking away from something doesn't mean you can't return to it stronger." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, "without you trusting me, believing in me, and giving me a reason to stop hiding." "You did the hard part," Ben replied. "I just gave you a reason." He stood up to leave, then paused. "Hey, Sarah, next time I need surgery, and given my job, there probably will be a next time. I'm glad you'll be here." "So am I," said. And I meant it. After Ben left, I stood at my office window, looking down at the entrance to the trauma wing. I watched soldiers arriving for treatment, and my staff moving with purpose. It was a facility built on lessons learned from both success and failure. It was designed to make sure that Alex Tanaka's death wasn't for nothing, that it had taught me how to save hundreds more. I had walked away from military medicine feeling broken, convinced I had nothing left to give. But I had come back stronger, wiser, and more capable. It wasn't despite my failure with Corporal Tanaka. It was because of it. Because sometimes the people who fail and learn from it are more valuable than the people who never fail at all. Sometimes the courage to come back after walking away matters more than never leaving. Sometimes saving one life gives you the strength to save hundreds more. I, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, had found my way back. And this time, I wasn't running away again.